Hello, good evening, and welcome to the Super License F1 podcast. My name is Rodney.
And my name is Zach.
Zach, it feels so good to be talking to you after this ridiculous self-imposed drought that we've had for the last 9 weeks, I want to say.
Yeah.
We're finally back. We're finally talking F1, sort of-ish, in our usual muck-around way. How have you been?
I've been so good. I've been missing Formula One, though. It's, when the season ends and you're just like, all right, good, just take a little bit of a breather. There's lots of other sport on and lots of things to, you think about Christmas or your holidays, whatever it is. And then you get into mid-Jan and you're like, oh my God, how many days is it till first race or at least testing or livery reveals or anything? Just give me something. But we're finally here now. We're in it's single digits, I think, right? Single digits until we're in Melbourne. Yeah, it is, I think. So... Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's that weird thing of what day do you actually count? Do you count the Thursday? Do you count the Friday, Saturday? Do you go with the race day? Certainly till the event starts, single digits. Yeah, for sure.
And so we're totes back.
Yeah. And the weird thing is, like you say, we've had a break and it's been wonderful. Hope everyone else had a wonderful break. But yeah, essentially... It's been a hectic one, F1-wise, with all the testing, and then there's been drama, and then you've been planning travel to come out here, I hear, for the race. But then also just things like I look out my window from my desk, and I can kind of look down, and I can actually see Albert Park from my desk. So it's kind of been on my mind more than a typical off-season.
You can see Albert Park from your desk. One of my earliest Formula One memories is I remember the office building that my auntie used to work in. I can't remember what building it was, but the windows in the bathrooms were floor to ceiling windows that looked directly over Albert Park. So I remember on a Friday, she took me into that office one day and was like, go into the guys' bathrooms, and I must have been 7 or 8 years old, and just look out and you'll be able to see the Formula One cars driving around. And this was, of course, in the high rev era. So you just hear them going, and you're standing up there looking at them from 20 floors up. It was outstanding. So how come you can see the track from your office?
Weird question. I don't know. My desk is kind of near a whole bunch of windows, and those windows look out across all of Port Melbourne, Albert Park. I can see the bay. I can see everything.
Prime real estate.
I've seen everything. It is, well, yeah. Funnily enough, yeah, it is. It's, I work on that fringe of Docklands down there where you can just kind of see the whole city. There's a view in every direction.
So lovely.
Melbourne,
so lovely. Have you got any setup insights? How's the track looking?
It looks small from where I sit. Very tiny. It's about an inch, maybe half an inch.
Is this a track for ants?
The main thing I'm looking at, because my view... if you can imagine looking at Albert Park, the sort of the width, it's not very wide, but it's pretty long. You know what I mean? The sort of shape of the lake. I can kind of look at it across the length, so it looks as wide as it is long. That's my perspective down on it. I'm looking for the pontoon to be built across the little gap, and they don't seem to have built it yet. Not that I can see anyway. But once the pontoon is in, that's when I know it's race day. That's when I know that they're getting ready for people to get down there and see stuff, which we're going to do. We'll make it to that a little bit later. But it's a bit of a different show than usual. There's obviously no race to talk about, but all the pre-season action and the liveries. My goodness, are we going to talk about the liveries? That's what we're definitely qualified to do. Talk about liveries and some of the talking points from, I guess, testing and then just around the F1 world, and then wrap it up with... Well, we're just going to cruise into the season, basically. That's how it's going to be. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I think that sounds like a really nice way to just cruise here. We want to bring up the Fantasy League is back, so we'll give you the details on that as well. But there is definitely lots of little news, niggly talking points to get around, especially because I'll be coming to the race. There's lots of things that I'm especially watching out for. Corona. Dear oh dear. So where do you want to start? Should we just jump into some liveries action?
I reckon so. Yeah. I mean, we're definitely, let's say we're not the most technical podcast in the world, but everyone knows what a car looks like, and most people know what colors look like, other than the colorblind, which ironically includes me. That means we may as well get started. So I've loaded up, for the benefit of you and Isaac in our notes, the cars in reverse championship order. So starting with Williams, I would say Williams have been underperforming the last few years, but overperforming livery-wise for the last, what would we say, for the whole tenure of this podcast, really, which is coming up on 7+ years. So there's been years where they had the best looking livery. Where do you think they sit at the moment with this one?
Those gleaming white liveries of the past were so nice. I was going through these liveries over the last couple of days, and there's a really good video on Formula1.com or their YouTube channel that like has nice slide overs and then transitions from last year's livery to this year's livery for each team, which is really nice. Also, it looks like they've asked each team for like 3D renders of the cars, and some teams like Mecedes put their car like in like a beautiful lobby of a hotel, and other teams have put theirs on like the what could be like the beach of Lake Como or something, and other teams are it's just a black background. Like it's a nothing space, like the nothing room in the Matrix.
The void,
But when I was looking at them, I feel like the Williams livery, because it's a nice big change, it's kind of leaping off the page to me, and it just looks really, I don't know, like it's not trying to do anything too complex. It's just like really like we are a race car. It almost reminds me of something like maybe like an Indy car, something like that. It's just very, primary color. There's been lots of jokes about it being a bit like Colgate, a bit like toothpaste. We can definitely see. But I don't know. I just like how it's kind of no nonsense, which I've also kind of liked of the Toro Rosso liveries from the last couple of years, that they've been very much just like shiny blue, silver. Here you go. What do you think of Williams?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't do anything wrong, but it's also not particularly adventurous, or it's not really taking any risks. It's just sort of splashing the colours around there. Rocket, they're very prominently displayed with the red and white on the back fin. That's good. Just blue around the trim, I guess you'd call it, and predominantly white. So, yeah, it's fine. It's got a good... the colours actually are pretty good in terms of like the colours that are used in all the other cars. Luckily, we don't really have any two cars that look identical like we've had in previous years. But yeah, this one, there'll be no mistaking this one, I think, as it trundles around the back with poor old, the poor old Williams drivers. I'm not expecting much more from them if their testing pace is to be believed. So yeah, it's fine. I give it a good solid 5 out of 10. And unless you have anything else to say, we can keep moving on.
Oh, Williams, room to improve. Now let's move on to Haas.
Yes. Returning back to their 2018 livery, which is sort of a bit more white, black, splashes of red. Gone is the rich energy, basically Lotus ripoff style. Yeah. It feels more like Haas though, and Haas had a year to forget last year, and I'm sure they'll be very glad to see the back of last year's livery. But this feels like the Haas of when they were at their best, and I'm sure they're hoping that their form follows. What do you think?
I really like this car for one specific reason, which is because the way the white highlights kind of across the top of the car and the rest of it is black. The black hides kind of like the baseboards and the kind of side pods really nicely. So it's going to really, like when you see it from like front on or from the top, it's like those slimming shirts and dresses, that like have they've just kind of, they black out the edges so that when you go into the nightclub, people are like, oh, look at that, that's a good shape.
Really? Been into the nightclub lately, have you?
Oh yeah, me all the time, definitely. Every week, my weekly nightclub dalliance. No, definitely not. But I also like that in their rendering, they chose the correct tire to match the livery, like black.
It matches,
with the white edges and the white writing. I really like this livery. I'm glad to see that they've kind of gone back to their traditional setup. A funny thing on Haas, I was watching like just some YouTube video of some YouTuber who does blacksmithing. I think maybe I brought it up before, but it was Alex Steele on YouTube. I really like his blacksmithing videos, and the pre-roll ad was just some guy talking about CNC like multi-axis routers, and of course they're just supplied by Haas. So he wasn't actually from Haas, he's from the CNC company, but everything behind him was Haas branded. I was like, that's right, you just do like machining. It's so, I mean, people think it's odd that Red Bull's in the sport, but at least they're like a commercial consumer product. Haas is like just like industrial level machine tool maker things. So anyway, as that aside, I think that the Haas livery is pretty good. I don't think that they were too troubled in making it. It was probably easier to go back to what they'd done in the past. But my overriding concern is that maybe and we'll talk, there'll be more liveries coming up that involve white, but there's a lot of like predominantly white cars on the grid now.
Yeah, more than before, more than previously. White is the new black. But to finish off the Haas car, I think it's a little bit more considered in the use of colour than the Williams is. So yeah, I would give it's a grade above the Williams for me. Another car though that's predominantly white, it might be what you're alluding to, or at least one of, is Alfa Romeo, which, I mean, I'm not sure that I can tell the difference between this year's car and last year's car, but
nope.
It's still got the big old snake and the weird sword thing on the side, which, whatever. Predominantly white down the side and the nose with a red, what would you call the engine cover and...
cooling cover, those kinds of things, yeah.
Yeah, right through down to the halo, and then it's more or less white right to the tip, so lots of white there. It's got a similar sort of black thing around the bottom as the Haas, but it hugs the body in a different way, so it's a little bit more balanced between the black and the white.
Yeah, I'm hoping that, you know, when someone's kind of slowed down into the gravel, that we can tell these three cars apart, that we can tell Williams, Haas and Alfa Romeo all easily apart before the camera zooms in, so I can get my my tweets out early, whatever they are.
The good thing is it won't be Williams, because they'll be breaking down after the first couple of laps.
Take that.
Racing Point, for the moment, next year they will be called Aston Martin, which, man, that's going to be confusing when that name change kicks in. But for now, they're still Racing Point, and they're still pink, still a big advert for BWT, and I was always a defender of the pink, but I mean... this design, it's looking more and more like a billboard than a car, which is the thing I don't really like about it.
Yeah, it's hard to kind of see the angles of the car. Like, it's hard to get an idea of how the car looks because the branding is so like well applied in kind of that like oversized print as well that doesn't quite fit the car, the BWT kind of diagonally on the side, which I kind of question, because is that easy for people to read? But I suppose they don't really care. I still love the pink. Surely this livery is going to drastically change in 2021. I can't imagine an Aston Martin driving around with a pink, like with full pink livery, right?
I mean, I guess that's an interesting point. I suppose so. What are Aston Martin's brand colours?
Oh,
do they have any?
No, they're kind of more like silvery and black. Yeah. And no, I don't think they really brand anything. Maybe a bit of like British Racing Green, that kind of stuff, possibly.
Oh, yeah, could be.
But yeah, it's hard to know. But for the time being, it's still really nice to see something bright and colourful and kind of insane, which is what, if you're trying to stand out, as I'm sure, you know, Papa Stroll is trying to do. He's trying to make this team just stand out in all circumstances.
Yeah, I love it. Another new name to get used to for next year is AlphaTauri, formerly Toro Rosso. A different sub-brand of the Red Bull family, but this livery, Zach, very black, very white, and this one, in the poll that was done by the Formula1.com website, this one was voted by fans as their standout favourite, and I know Toro Rosso's liveries recently have been some of our favourites as well, but this one... given the colour scheme, I don't really love, but the look of it is good. The use of the logo is good. Yeah, I just wish it had a third colour, or even some kind of blend between the two shades or something. It's very contrasty.
Yeah, it could almost use something that like Mecedes used, the kind of interlocking pattern to go from silver to black or silver to blue, where they use like a crossfade of either their logo or a pattern shape or something like that to kind of move between the two colours. This is like hard white on hard black, really contrasts. To me, this is a little bit like, you know, when something's really minimal and you say, okay, was that like really judicious use of like a design eye, or was that, let's go for something simple so we don't have to overthink it, so we don't have to do too much with it. Or maybe we don't have a huge amount of sponsors either to be able to like fit in there.
There's a bit of that.
So, you know, I think it's definitely very clean. Whether it's really cool or interesting, I don't think so. I think I agree with you. The logo use is really good. I think their logo is really great. The cars are easily identifiable. But yeah, I think this is just their like, okay, new team, new starting point. Let's just be really basic. You know, and we'll go from there.
It's got a touch of the Alfa Romeos as well, and it's not bad enough that they already share the first word of their team names, but they have a curvy, thick, stroked logo featuring an animal on the side of their engine cover. So I feel for people who are learning what the teams are because they must have so many questions. Renault hit the track with a testing livery that was basically all black. They looked like Batmobiles running around out there. Close up of the actual running livery, I think, had like a snake kind of diamond pattern on it, like a snake skin pattern. But yeah, I mean, as far as I understand, today of recording, we're going to be seeing a different, altered slightly livery maybe for the racing action. Expect a few more splashes of yellow, but I don't think we're going to be seeing the banana yellow cars of the past.
No, I think that, again, they've gone probably a little more minimal. It's difficult because I quite like the yellow. I like that they're super identifiable. I like it much like with I was going to call them Force India, but Racing Point / going to be Aston Martin. It's not just the liveries of the car, but the race suits as well. Nice and pink, bright. They add a little bit of flair to the paddock, and I like that about Renault with the really bright yellow racing suits as well. And excited to see Daniel Ricciardo's full new awesome helmet because he had that great helmet last year. Looking forward to seeing his helmet for this year as well. So yeah, it's not much more to say on Renault, I would say.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what there is to say. I think it's deliberately it just doesn't encourage comment in any way particularly. I don't think that's on purpose. McLaren are returning with an papaya orange and blue car. Yeah. I feel like this is a different shade of orange. I feel like every year it's a different shade of orange. It feels more pastel-y, more fluoro maybe than the deep papaya, which I actually never really liked that much, but it had its fans. It looks okay to me. I don't mind the colours, but it does look to be same but different. Yeah, no,
that's that. When I held up the two against each other, it was like, am I noticing the difference just in that orange? Is the setup exactly the same? And the cars are so similar to last year as well. You're not seeing any big change in the way the car looks. So there's almost not. Maybe they're just like, let's spend more time on the car and less time on the livery.
Well, I think when you have a good year, you want to keep a livery that's sort of similar, if only so that people recognize you. But there's, it's one of those superstitious things like, maybe there's a little bit of luck in the way we painted the colors on that car. I think McLaren are probably in for another good year in the midfield, probably leading the midfield, but I guess we'll see. We get into the top three, and to be honest, I feel like these three pretty much always disappoint, so there may not be much to say. Red Bull, I mean, you could probably put this livery up against any livery they've had in the last decade, with the exception of changing from shiny to matte. Has it changed really at all? They've gone from having... now they say Red Bull on the side. That was a change from, I think, a couple of years ago. It used to not say that, which was confusing, but really this car just has not really... They don't seem to want to use the car as an experimental design option. No,
they're being almost more conservative now, especially just by having Red Bull on the side when it used to say Infinity and those kinds of things. I mean, they're not even putting, they could be plastering Honda on the side there, but they've just decided this is the lead Red Bull car. It's going to say Red Bull on the big part on the the side pods there, and we're going to own the Red Bull brand, whereas previously. Toro Rosso was kind of owning the Red Bull brand a little bit more, which was kind of interesting. On the matte finish thing, a lot of cars are doing the matte paint job now, so it doesn't feel like their own thing. I almost wish they would go to hyper shine now, so polished that it's just like the old McLarens that were super silver. That's what I want.
Yes, so chrome you can see yourself in it. But it's just, I don't know, there's just not much to say about it. Speaking of not much to say about it, Ferrari, it's still red. I
love that red. It's a nice red, I have to say.
It's fine.
I like the modern red that they're using, but it is just kind of, hey, that it's them, the red car, there they are, Ferrari.
Back in red, back on the track. We'll get to their testing issues in a minute after we wrap up Mecedes. And there was a slight change with Mecedes when they announced a new sponsor, and those sponsor came with some colours. Those colours were slightly incorporated into the livery, but again, this is very recognisable as a Mecedes, and I'm sure it will be very recognisable, winning lots of races this year.
How come we haven't ever said that before? Mecedes, races.
I don't know.
It's good. Yeah, I mean, it's funny because we actually only see them generally at the start of the race and the end of the race, right? You don't see much of Mecedes during the race.
Yeah, I guess that's kind of true.
So, yeah, I like the little bit of red around there, the airbox on the top there. I think that's cool. But yeah, other than that, not a huge amount.
Yeah, and again, they utilize, like you said before, that sort of there's a slight sort of gradient or a shift between two different shades here and there. But I mean, it's yeah, there's no mistaking this one. They own that look. There's nothing else that really looks anything like it. So there's no reason for them to change, and no one else is going to rip them off. So yeah, well done, Mecedes. And yeah, I guess we should get into some of the testing talk, because there was a talking point about them, and it was really, I think it was the very first day of testing where the Mecedes DAS system was unveiled. Well, there was a few hours where people were sort of looking at the car going, something weird's going on here, but James Allen pretty much came out and said, not James Allen, what's the guy's name?
The technical director at Mecedes, James Allison. Yeah. He came out and was like, this is exactly how it works, right? And everyone was like, oh, that was nice of you to tell us.
It is a thing that we've built and no one else has it, and here's what it does. So conjecture no more. You pull the steering wheel back and the wheels go straight instead of pointing, either towards each other or away from each other, sort of angling in and out. They call it toe in or toe out. Ferrari came out and said, yeah, we thought about doing that, but we didn't do it because we thought it might be illegal, and we also weren't sure it was going to be a benefit. Mecedes apparently have been talking to the FIA about this for a little while, and they feel very confident that they won't get banned this year, which is good for them. And I guess some of the postulating or some of the theories around why this might be good is that it might spread the temperature more evenly across the tyres as it goes down the straight, which will just give them slightly better tyre wear. But I mean, with my naked eye, I couldn't even see the wheels moving, but apparently they straighten as they go down the straight by something like half of a degree. So there's no way I was going to see that. The steering wheel pull back, you do see that. They actually pull it back by maybe 2 or 3 inches or something like that. So it's quite a pronounced move on the steering wheel. The interesting thing, though, I think also is that the FIA have said, yep, you can use that this year if you want, but no one can use it next year. It is outlawed. So I just don't know what Mecedes are going to do here. Are they going to make out like it's a big deal to try and trick someone into trying to develop their own one, which might set them on the back foot next year? Or does Mecedes actually say, if we can't use this next year, then we're not even going to bother using this. Like, we may as well just not even use it.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe they'll only use it where there's a really big impact, like on, maybe at Monza with really long straights, those kinds of things. Like really quick tracks, Interlagos.
We're not going to China, but yeah, that is long straights.
That'll come up. Yeah, exactly. Baku, as you said. But and it didn't seem like it was causing them any issues at testing. Like, it's not a really big, like, it doesn't really interact with the engine or anything. It's just a slight change. It's almost like was Red Bull, was it Red Bull or Ferrari that had, like, the F duct? You know how you take your hand off the steering wheel, you put it over a certain spot in the dash, and that would change the airflow, and that got banned at some point. I can't remember which team was using that. But
feels like a Red Bull thing, but I don't know.
Yeah, this kind of specific. It's nice that it's very mechanical, it seems. Like, you have to pull the steering wheel towards you as opposed to press a button.
In terms of how they get around the regulations, their argument was, well, he's steering the wheels. He might not be steering them both to the left or both to the right. They're steering in opposite directions, but they're still steering. It's not suspension, which I think that's a pretty dubious argument, to be honest. But it is what it is.
Yeah, we'll see. I don't think it's going to have a huge impact. Mecedes were going to be a front runner anyway, but the fact that they're kind of making a big deal of it means that maybe they've seen in simulations that it does count for, over a race distance. It could count for something. It could just give you the edge on maybe wearing tire heat, pressure, and wear were really the only concerns for Mecedes last year. So they're bad at cooling those cars because they expect to be in the front. So maybe this will help them.
Maybe
it's a sport of millimeters. So that can help. Half a degree is a lot in Formula One. So we shall see. Should we talk about... I mean, there wasn't... As far as like actual testing goes, it's funny because every single person involved in Formula One goes, testing tells you nothing. Now let's talk about testing for 4 hours. So you're like...
exactly.
I mean, it sounds like a lot of the talk is that Ferrari maybe kind of showed a bit of their hand. Like Ferrari's like, yeah, we're quick. Whereas Mercedes, like every year they've been in Formula One, turn up and they're like, God, we're so slow. Oh, our car sucks. God, I wish we were faster than Ferrari. And then they turn up to the first race and they're awesome. So really the big surprise, maybe not surprise, but the big talking point, I think, is the Racing Point looking basically exactly the same as the Mecedes 2019 car. They bought a lot of parts, designs, whatever it is from Mecedes to try and kind of limit the amount of work they have to do on the car this year and trying to make it as fast as possible, because there's no reason to suggest that last year's Mercedes wouldn't still be a really competitive car this year, obviously with newer engine in it, a newer Mercedes engine in it. And they looked really quick, which is great news for everybody at Racing Point and the whole hardworking team there. So we wish them all the best. But does that rub you up the wrong way morally, ethically, sportingly?
I never had a problem when Haas bought Ferrari's parts and cars, pushed right to the limit of what was acceptable. So if I never had a problem with them doing it, I can't say I have a problem with Racing Point doing it. The other thing that was noted last year was the effort that the teams had to go to develop not just last year's car, but then start developing this year's car. And then with the regulation change coming next year, they had to start thinking about the year after cars. So all of a sudden, teams were developing 3 cars at once, which is never really ideal. So it does make a lot of sense for teams that can do it, like Racing Point, to just say, we're just going to buy one off the shelf, and then we only have to develop 2 cars that way. So that, yeah, it's a smart move. I just don't know that it's going to pay off for them in the long run this year, but they'll certainly start off pretty well. And then I guess they'll be hoping next year when they become Aston Martin that they will be blitzing it then.
Yeah, exactly. Should we have a quick word about the FIA investigation of Ferrari's 2019 engine?
I don't know, Zach, tell me, did anything happen with the FIA investigation of Ferrari's engine from last year?
I mean, basically, there was an investigation into whether Ferrari was doing legal things with their engine, and basically the FIA came out and said, we've come to an agreement with Ferrari that everything was fine, and don't worry about it. And the rest of the teams went, pardon?
What?
What?
What the hell?
Could you give us literally any details at all about what the investigation was about? So, yeah, every other team that's not a Ferrari-supplied team, Alfa Romeo and Haas all came out, wrote a joint letter threatening legal action if they didn't get full transparency on what this investigation was, what the outcome was, and what the identified problems with Ferrari's thing were. Because it's not like they found that Ferrari was... If they found they were just totally illegal, they just would have come out and said, yeah, everything was fine. But the fact that they had to come to an agreement with Ferrari, like settle essentially with Ferrari, means that maybe Ferrari have said, hey, we'll take a back seat in this season, or we will, we won't take any of those special things that you didn't necessarily like about our engine and put them in the 2020 engine or the 2021 engine. It's just a bit annoying F1 Ferrari stuff. Like, Ferrari always has secret deals with the FIA and Formula One generally, so they always just seem to be treated a little bit special, and nobody else likes that.
Yeah, I would stop short of saying that this is evidence that they were cheating and that the FIA are covering it up. I would stop short of that. But there is, as part of this settlement that has been announced, there is some compensation that Ferrari have to give the FIA, as in, we're going to be providing like technology and working with you in sustainability and bringing technology to road cars and all kinds of other stuff. And it's like, well, if part of the settlement is you have to give them something, what is it that they have on you that is a that is a square up for? Like, what is that? And that's where the teams are sort of thinking, hang on a second, there was talk that they were doing something dirty, and now there seems to be kind of mea culpaing their way out of it. And it's like, well, but what were they doing? Whether they found a loophole in the rules that maybe wasn't in the spirit of the rules, but legal to the letter, and the FIA said, well, we need a way out of this. We either throw you out of the sport or you...
They just never would do.
They would never do that. But yeah, I mean, you know what I'm trying to say. They're sort of getting to the point of like, well, maybe we regulate this out of the sport, which will mean you lose that advantage that you had. And they go, well, no. What we'll do is we'll just keep exploiting this loophole, but we'll help you in other ways. And I'm sure, and if that's the case, I can understand why the other teams have been so annoyed. But I flip-flop on this one because I think unless the teams know for sure that Ferrari were cheating, and unless, I don't understand how they can get annoyed at the FIA for saying we have no evidence that Ferrari were cheating, and that's that. Unless they have evidence that they were cheating, I don't understand why they're so upset. Which means that they probably do know something, but they don't want to say it.
No, yeah. So maybe the other teams have a suspicion that Ferrari were cheating, and that maybe it's being swept under the rug. But we'll see. Yeah. I'm guessing it'll go through the FIA will talk to the teams, and this will all probably go away. Because 2021, like this season is a bit of an odd season, because if it goes like last season, teams will just give up on the 2020 season very early to start to continue and put more resources into 2021. The big change in the formula, the rules around cars, everything like that. For those of you who are new to Formula One, we're getting a full formula change in 2021, which means how the engines need to be produced, the rules around the aerodynamics of the car, the size of the car, the way they're built, all of these kinds of things, cost on how much teams can spend on their team and the development of the car, how many parts they're allowed to replace and reuse. So all of that is changing in 2021, which makes the 2020 season a bit of a funny fit. So we'll see how different teams deal with that. Rod, why don't we talk about how teams are going to be dealing with Corona, COVID-19, or is it 17? I can never remember. The point 19. Being, COVID-19, the hot new thing that's sweeping the globe, and it's actually quite a very serious thing. And specifically, the Chinese Grand Prix has been called off for now. They're hoping to run it in Shanghai at some point in the season. Vietnam, there's doubts around how much reporting Vietnam is doing on the coronavirus, so there is a chance that could be shifted or cancelled as well. And then with travel bans coming from the Australian government on South Korea, China, or regions of China, but Australia at this point is kind of edging towards being very careful about who's going to be coming from Italy or northern Italy, specifically certain regions in northern Italy, into Australia. They'll be tested and possibly quarantined, and that is not what teams like Ferrari and AlphaTauri need in this circumstance, because if their team members are kind of given the guarantee that they can come to Australia and then are quarantined, it's very difficult for those teams to run their race, and maybe the other teams wouldn't necessarily feel comfortable having to putting their team members or personnel in a inherently more risky environment, because it's just a big sporting event with lots of people from all around the world who could be from anywhere. So it's difficult, I think, at this stage to see how the teams are going to cope with the kind of uncertainty. There's Ross Brawn from Formula One management has said that if not all the teams can compete, then this would no longer be an FIA World Championship race, so there'd be no points and it wouldn't count, but they would try their best to still host and hold the event. It's obviously incredibly important to Melbourne and Victoria and Australia tourism, so all of the government officials and members for the portfolio of sport in Victoria have come out and said, we are running this event, it's going to happen. Well, maybe that's not necessarily up to them, because the teams can kind of make their own decisions as well. I know that they sign contracts saying they have to go, but under circumstances where it's kind of a bit uncertain and pretty crazy, then you could see how some teams might not want to take full part or any part.
Yeah, part of the problem is, like you say, if one team can't make it, then the whole event just loses, classification, or that's the decision they've made, which it wasn't announced for a while. What's going to happen? What happens if Ferrari can't come? What happens if, Williams can't come? It's like, it's sort of tempting to say, well, it's Williams, who cares? But really, unless all of the listed entries are able to take part free, in a free world, if they choose to opt out, that's different. But if they literally cannot travel due to governmental travel bans, then it's completely appropriate for them to say this is no longer a race paying points paying race. Part of the problem too is that a lot of the teams will sort of hop around on flights, so it's not as easy as just saying, well, just don't fly through China. It's like, well, but our flight from Italy to wherever was going to pass here, stop here, and the situation is also changing like day by day. So not only country by country, but day by day, the situation in each country is changing. So it's just the crystal ball is pretty murky right now. Obviously, yeah, as you say, it would be good to see a race happen regardless, because like I say, looking out the window, looking at the old race getting built every single day. But at the end of the day, we've got to stop this virus from spreading. We need to limit the amount of damage that it can do. Some things are bigger than the sport, yes, even Formula One. So
yeah, and they have. I mean, Formula One and the teams have a duty of care both to their personnel and especially in the Melbourne. The Melbourne promoter of Formula One has a duty of care to the attendees. So
and look at the lengths that we're going to as a sport to make it safer and avoid any potential loss of life. Like, this is the easiest way to do that, is to just say, we have to, look at any restrictions that might be in place, because if anyone gets this virus, it's going to just spread like wildfire. I mean, even little common colds and flus, they spread through the paddock already like wildfire. So it's really a petri dish, and it not only brings people together where they run the events, but everyone who goes to that event who is part of a team travels through multiple airports. And if one person catches it off someone else, it's just going to spread everywhere. So it's bad news if it gets out.
Yeah, so I would be, I'm kind of, as maybe I've alluded to, but I'm coming to Melbourne for this race, a whirlwind trip of 5 days, and I'm flying through Singapore, currently a Category 2 listed country by the UK for
never mind that, it's fine.
Coronavirus.
I'll put in the word for you there, and you'll be okay.
Yeah, so I'm hoping that the race goes ahead, full points paying, all the teams come, and it's a fantastic event, and it's all great. That's number one, and hopefully I can come too. So all the fingers crossed for everybody involved, including me. So, we'll see how things go. I hope everybody's taking the proper precautions. The best thing you can do is wash your hands. Wash them for 20 seconds. Sing happy birthday twice. Make sure you're getting on the top, the back, in between the fingers, all that kind of stuff. Using soap, obviously. It's not washing your hands without soap. And doing that often. And, no unnecessary travel to the places that are listed as having it badly. So I hope everybody's staying safe out there.
And if you're travelling to Australia, maybe just pop in one spare roll of toilet paper, because we're having a bit of a mental problem here right now. We're all losing our shit and buying toilet paper like it's going out of fashion. Please maybe just consider bringing one roll lest you get caught short. A couple of things to wrap up the show with, Zach. Our favourite Netflix show about Formula One. Is it the only one? Must be the only one. Drive to Survive Season 2. It's out. Everyone needs to get around it. I haven't really checked this with you, but I think we'll probably do another recap episode for the club members about the season. Our thoughts about every episode and highlights and lowlights. The last one was very well received and just generally a lot of fun. So we'll do that. If you're a club member, you'll get an exclusive podcast episode about our thoughts on the Drive to Survive season. And to kick it home, Zach, tell us about the Fantasy League.
Fantasy League is back. The super license F1 podcast Fantasy League is back. So if you had a team last year, you can just log on, activate your team, and you should automatically be in the league. Now, if you don't have a team, let me just get the details up for you now. It is fantasygp.com. You want to go there.
I was going to do the same thing. Very good.
fantasygp.com. Create your team, you create your login, all that kind of stuff, and then you want to join a private league. Our private league number is 5328208. Rod will put that in the show notes, I'm sure, and just get on board, because it's where fans of the show come in. They pick you get a budget, you pick your teams and driver lineup, which you can change through the season depending on how people are going. And we mention the week's best performers, or that weekend's best performers on the show, as well as keeping track of the top of the table. So yeah, it's a whole heap of fun.
Yeah, and even if you're like me, you've got no talent or no aptitude for this sort of thing, every week there's special challenges like how many safety cars are there going to be? Will Grosjean finish the race? Fun things like that. So it's enough to keep you interested. Again, that's fantasygp.com. Put in the Fantasy League code 5328208. That will also be in the show notes, as Zach said. That's at superlicense.com.au under the podcast link, and then we'll also put it on the Facebook group, which is Super License Universe, a little group of Super License fans just talking about fan stuff and being fans generally. And then there's also our Twitter, twitter.com/superlicense, and we usually, we get around that a little bit. We'll try and get around that a little bit more this year. I feel like last year we had a nice relaxed year on the old social media, Twitter especially, but this year we'll try and kick it up one gear, no more than one. Yeah, but I guarantee you at least one.
It's about being able to watch races live and do all those kinds of things.
Yeah, that's
some of
tricky.
us have a small child.
Some of us have to sit up till the
half
early
of this
hours
podcast
of the morning often. Yes, you could say. Actually, it was Poppy's birthday yesterday. Happy birthday,
Woo,
Poppy.
happy birthday, Poppy.
2 years. And it's nice to actually be going to the race this year after a 2-year break.
So, what, 3 or 4 more years and she'll be co-hosting the show, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm hoping that she'll be driving by the time she's, 8 or so. So,
man. Yes, definitely. All right, should we think about wrapping it up?
I think we should definitely think about that. So, yeah, we'll talk to you again after the Australian Grand Prix. Oh, we might try and put out a few little, while we're together, maybe shoot a few little minutes of video or something, or something special while we're together to mark the occasion and while we're killing time between sessions at the race on Sunday. But, yeah, unless you see those, the next time you'll hear from us will be after the Australian Grand Prix, giving you our thoughts and congratulating Lewis Hamilton on another victory, probably. And until then, my name's been Rodney.
My name's been Zach.
We'll see you after the Australian Grand Prix. Bye-bye.
Bye.